you guys going into your seasons. I was talking to Dale this morning about catching a guy that he had. He was looking for a catcher to play. He didn't have anybody. I said, take the best infielder and put him behind the plate. And typically, that's kind of what we do. We don't draft a whole lot of frontline catchers in our organization. For example, Russell Martin, who I'm sure most of you guys know, he's been around the big leagues for a long time now. My first year as a manager, he was a third baseman. So they decided they were going to put him behind the plate because he's a great athlete. 4 or 5 years later, he wins his first Gold Glove. The guy Carlos Santana, some of you guys might know, is a catcher in the Cleveland Indians organization. He's been in the big leagues for maybe 3 years now. He was a third baseman with us. My first year as a catching instructor, we put him behind the plate. 3 years later, he's in the big leagues. We've got a kid now, Kyle Farmer, drafted out of University of Georgia in 2013. Frontline shortstop, couldn't run. We draft him, he's behind the plate, now he's one of our better prospects. So, just in saying, if you're looking for a catcher and you don't have anybody, and you can afford to do it, take your best infielder and put him behind the plate. Because all the stuff that was just spoken about with the previous speaker with infield, everything ties into catching. It's all very simple. We're just running from a squad position. So what I'm going to focus on today, the first thing I think is the most important is the setup. If you can't get your catcher in a good setup, everything else is difficult. It gets overlooked. You think, well, anybody can squat down and catch the ball. Well, not true. You have to be in an athletic position. You can't do that. Everything else is just more difficult. The first thing I'll start with, let's go over the sign setup. Very basic, but I find that if it's not gone over, given detail to, then as a coach for the opposition, you can take advantage of a catcher if he's not doing it properly. So for me, when we're given our signs, there's 3 people on the field who should see our signs: pitcher, shortstop, second baseman. And there's a number of reasons why. Obviously, the pitcher needs to get the sign. Let's say we get a throw over from the bench. Pitcher needs to throw over sign to the pitcher. Middle infielders need to see that so they can break towards the bag as soon as the guy turns and goes to first. Inside move sign. Maybe it comes from the bench, we put it on. Shortstop needs to see that so he can lay back. That guy gets a little bit more secondary. He hangs himself, he gets to get on the inside. Pitch out. We give a pitch out sign. The shortstop or second baseman can't see it. There's a right-handed hitter. Guy goes, shortstop covers, or the second baseman covers. And that guy, however gets bat on the ball, shoots it to the hole. Guy's first and third. So everybody needs to be able to see the signs up the middle. Obviously, we don't want the corner guys to see them. If they can see them, base runners can see them. And I'm sure you guys watch TV. They show the guys out there getting the lead. Base runners are called to peek in and try to get signs. Everybody does it. So if my catcher's not doing it properly, when he squats, it's kind of typical when you see a guy who's not paying attention to the detail of what he's doing, where his knees are just slightly open and he gets a sign. Maybe it's a pitch out, maybe it's a slide step, maybe it's a throw. A good base runner is going to get out there, and he's looking in, he's going to see that, and he's going to shut it down. So we need to make sure when we give our signs, our feet are pointed straight ahead, when the ball's over the feet, and we've got to make sure that the only people seeing them are the guys up the middle. All right? Very basic. The other thing that you'll see sometimes that catchers do, younger catchers who aren't paying attention to what they're doing, when they give their signs, they'll actually carry their signs out with them. So you can see that here if you're watching and paying attention to what's going on. Another common mistake, guy gets a fastball, guy gets a slider, you see the elbow flare out. So little things like that, you're going to be able to pick up on and take advantage, especially for a base runner. Not so much for the hitter. I know guys relay signs to the hitters. I think more times than not, base runners take advantage of catchers giving signs improperly. Especially like a slide step. If they see that, we're taught as base runners, if you see a slide step, shut it down. Pitch out, the same thing. So just make sure your guys are doing it right, not getting lazy with it. To me, I just think it goes back to just like the previous speaker, paying attention to the detail of everything they're doing. After we give our signs, the other 2 setups we talk about, for me, I call them the receiving setup, action setup. Most guys refer to it as primary and secondary. Receiving setup. For me, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I like teaching angles, I like teaching stagger, I like teaching straight ahead, whatever works best for your guy. Everybody's going to be different. I'm 5'8" on my best day. So things for me are going to be easier than a guy who's 6'5". So I have to be able to teach guys with different body types to do different things. just like with the infield play. When we talk about our feet, and our setup, it's basically right foot, right big toe, even in the middle of our left foot as we get into our setup. All right? I like having the right foot slightly back, basically like an infielder would be throwing a ground ball. Traditional style of teaching catching, a lot of guys when they squat, they'll have their feet straight ahead. For me, I like to have the left foot pointed straight ahead and the right foot slightly open. The big thing I see with a lot of younger catchers, and this is just a personal thing, when catchers squat, you're going to see a lot of guys, when they squat down, they get on the inside of their feet like this. To me, that's not an athletic position. It causes you to work over top of your legs. You don't have the same range on pitches outside of the strike zone. So what we like to have our guys do is they squat, stay on the balls of their feet, keep the heels down, and be more in this position as opposed to this position. Because I can't use my legs to stay behind the ball if I'm here. But if I'm in this position here, I'm able to use my legs a little bit better. Now obviously we're talking about pitches that are off the plate that we're not going to get called strikes, but I still have to be able to catch it. But if I lock myself in, my range is limited, so I can't reach as far. This ball here is tough, especially if you're in a position where you're like this, you have no ability to push, so you're going to end up catching the ball deep, and your reach range is limited. This way is not too bad because it's on your glove side, so you have a little bit better opportunity to catch it ball. But for me, if you can teach your guys to squat, knees inside the feet, I'll show you from the side too. Knees inside the feet, and the knees should clear the toes. When you see a guy like this, where his knees are directly over his toes, with the weight's back on the heels, that's an unathletic position. So when you're explaining this, you have to be careful to say, hey, get your feet flat. Because a lot of kids mistake that as getting back on their heels. And what I don't want is this position here where my hip line's bad. I want to be more here, knees out over my toes, slightly inside of my feet. Now when you see a kid who's back on his heels, typically his hip line's bad, and you're going to see this right here, where the knees are going first and third. All right, this is not athletic. Kind of a reference point for our guys is second and short. So if I'm doing it right, my knees should be going second base or shortstop. All right, so it's pretty basic, but as basic as it is to me because I've been doing it for so long. A lot of kids that we get can't get in that position. We had a kid that we drafted 2009, 2010, and we talked about this, so I don't feel like I'm saying anything behind his back. Johnny Bench Award winner out of the University of Oklahoma. And he couldn't get in the squat. He could throw, he could hit, but he couldn't squat. Very stiff hips. And I'm thinking, what can I do for this guy to help him? Well, we got him yoga, we got him extra stretching, anything we could think of, we tried to do it. It just didn't work. He was a guy whose knees first and third, feet were stiff, ankles were stiff. 2 years after we signed him, we had to put him in first base. It just didn't work. So my thing is, you can look at a guy pretty quickly and say, this guy's got a chance to catch, or this guy doesn't, based on the ability to get down and squat. And by the way, if you have any questions, stop me, and I'll try to answer them. Receiving setup.
How did you get it? We got it.
Right.
How did you?
Well, I got in a little hot water for doing it, but I thought it was the right thing to do at the time. When I was coming up, you see a lot of guys catch on one knee, but nobody knew. This guy was having trouble working under the baseball. So we had a couple guys on the staff who are now pitching in the big leagues actually, for other teams. You know, loaded in 90s with a hard seam. So he's got to go work underneath the ball. We just brought him on his left knee. So basically he was catching in this position here. Nobody on base, to me, it's not a big deal. A couple of people in the organization like it, so they were going to let him do it. He didn't catch it. I mean, if you see a guy who can't get in a good position, he just makes things tough. So I have found that guys do it as silly as it sounds, stretching their feet, stretching their ankles, will tend to help them get a little bit lower. But some guys just can't do it. I mean, I know that sounds kind of bad, but some guys that don't have the ability to do it, nobody on base, they just drop them down on one knee. So it's not going to affect anything. And then as they get interaction, so if they have to do it a little bit better because they can get wider, or even our receiving setup, one more thing about the receiving setup. I give guys the freedom to do things based on the type of pitcher that they're catching. So, Clayton Kershaw. Obviously, everybody in the room knows Clayton Kershaw and how good he is. He's not easy to catch. Everything's hard. Everything's got sharp angles on it. So our major league catcher was having problems catching left-handed pitchers based on his setup. Not because he couldn't do it, but because of his setup, we had to tweak some things. He was the guy who was basically even with his feet like this. So anything cutting across the plate, he was having a tendency to ride out of the strike zone. So I have found that guys who are catching lefties or maybe right-handed sinkers where the ball's keeping them up here, instead of having their feet so even, basically take their body, turn it toward the second baseman so that now they're in this position here. So they cut the ball off coming across the plate, they're able to take better angles, if that makes sense. Now, on the flip side of that, you got a right-handed hard slider, left-handed pitcher, hard sinker. I've seen guys, and I didn't teach this until about 6 years ago. The guy has trouble with the ball to his right. Nobody on base. I'm here creating this angle because this is the ball that gives me problems. I've seen guys now start to take right foot slightly ahead when they're setting up away from the righty, maybe in on the left, so that they're creating a better angle to get this ball here. So giving guys freedom to do something that helps them, I don't have a problem with it. But the biggest thing I want you guys to understand with the catching is if you see guys that really get rolled in on their feet, and I used to do it too until I realized when you start catching guys who go really hard with a lot of movement, you're limiting yourself. So basically weight on the balls of the feet, not necessarily on the heels, but your heels are on the ground, knees inside, and the other thing here too, with your upper body, trying to get slight angle over top of your knees, all right? Now, some of the younger kids that I work with when I'm home doing lessons, this is something typical I see, and I get to watch my kids occasionally playing high school ball. And you see this with a lot of catchers in high school. If they can just fix these little things, it'd be so much better. Typical high school catcher, when he gives his sign, the glove's really extended, or when he gives his target, it's way up here. What we're trying to do is take away all the tension in our setup. So I'd rather take a guy who maybe has a good setup, but his target, he's creating tension, just basically set it closer to his body. All right? Now, like we was talking about with the infield play, slight down or flexion in the arm. So instead of being here, have my wrist locked, I'm just going to sit back here. All right? Now, pitching coaches on the flip side will say, well, I want that nice target with the gloves open so I can see it. Well, the time I spent with our big league club, we had some pretty good pitchers. And my thing was, how much do y'all throw to the glove? Obviously, it's a different level. They don't necessarily throw to the glove. They throw to parts of your body, whether it's your left knee, right knee, mask, right shoulder, left shoulder. So as a pitching coach who's never called, respectfully, I say this here is hard to do. It's hard to give a target like this, where your wrist is locked out, you feel like you're relaxed. When I get to the target, instead of being here where my wrist is stiff, I'll be nice and relaxed. Now, something that most guys do when they give their target in their setup is the finger's going to be pointed up. This here is another common mistake I see with some of our younger guys that we draft, where they're in this position here and the thumbs down. What ends up happening is the elbow gets slightly above the glove, so that anything to the glove side wears them out. What we try to do is keep the elbow even or below the hand and have my hand in this position here. So my target looks like this. Now, pitching coaches will argue with you all day because you're not doing this. This is hard to do. The old Gary Carter, some of you guys might remember Gary Carter with Expos. He was able to do that. Not many guys can. So trying to take all the tension out of the setup. All right? Any questions so far on that? Yeah, basically, but we are starting there instead of actually going there. Dale's asking about like a quarter turn, which is what I was taught. So if I'm here like this, I'm just going to quarter turn as the ball's on the way. Well, basically, we've kind of eliminated that, so we're just going to start with my thumb and my fingers are pointed up. And kind of when I'm explaining to young kids, this here is basically making an L shape as I get my target. All right. Another thing, ball's on the way, what do I do with my glove? Some guys are very stagnant, they don't move at all. Some guys have a little bit of rhythm that they do. If you've got a guy who's a pull guy this way and then he goes back out, you have to be sure that as he pulls, this elbow stays tight. All right? Some guys like to just stay here, turn the thumb up. Some guys will actually drop. Going back to Russell Martin, he was a guy who dropped. Watch him on TV, drops, gets back up. I would never teach that. This dude has phenomenal hands. Unbelievable. The one pitch that we get him, if he was catching Kershaw, was that fastball right at his left knee, or if his timing was off when he dropped, he'd end up having to do this to retreat from the ball and give himself time. So dropping the glove, you want to try to stay away from it. So for me, timing, I want to teach thumb towards the chin, just right here, just a little give. That kind of turns into a little bit of a quarter turn. Okay? Any questions? There's so many things you can talk about for receiving, but if you can get a guy in a good setup, he's got a much better chance. It's not really, really difficult. You're sitting back there going, man, why can't this guy catch the ball? Ball after ball at the backside. So for me, if I can get a guy in a setup, give him a nice low target, give him something to help him feel relaxed, he's going to have a chance. Now going from the receiving setup to the action setup. All right? I was taught growing up, and a lot of this stuff I'm getting ready to say goes back to, I think catchers changed more than any position over the last 40, 50 years, based on one thing, the glove. I was taught by two guys who called it the old no-break glove, and they had to do everything with two hands. That's how I learned to catch. You don't have to do that anymore. To me, there's very few things that a catcher has to do where he has to use two hands, other than maybe a tag play at the plate. Even on the throw to second base, throw to third, on the steal, we're still not using two hands. Because it slows us down. And because the gloves are so good now, you don't have to do that. So when we get in our action setup, after I get my sign, the only difference is where I'm here in my receiving setup, I might have my right hand back. I'm just going to walk my feet out a little bit, and take my hand from here and get it right here. I was taught before, as a young kid, when that runner gets on base, you got to get that butt up, and you got to get your hand right behind the glove. So it ended up being like this right here. Bat gets real flat. You create tension out here. I'm not saying these things are wrong, but it makes it more difficult. All right? So instead of being here with all my weight going forward, I'm basically relaxing and bringing my glove closer, and I'm putting my hand here. All right? I want everything to come to me. I don't want to have to go out and get the ball. It's just like hitting. Guys say, hey, let the ball get to you. Don't go get the ball. Catching the same way. So if I get in this position here, I feel like I'm already going forward. That's not athletic. All right? So really, we're in our receiving setup with nobody on base because that's what's comfortable to us. Ask any catcher, why do you do this? This is where I feel best. So if I feel best right here with nobody on base, some guys put their hand here all the time, nobody on base, some guys will drop it back. So if I'm comfortable here, just spread my feet out a little bit, and that kind of gets my butt up just enough to where I can block and throw. So we don't want our setups to be that much different. Now, you'll watch a guy like Yachty with the Cardinals. Really, really staggered. Left foot straight, right foot's here, and he's in this position here. He's developed that style that works for him. For me, as long as our right foot's slightly back, slightly open, and we get athletic, get our hand up in here, it's much easier. All right? The other thing with the hand, just a safety thing, keep the fingers lightly wrapped around the thumb. All right? Probably something all you guys know, but just a reminder to the catchers. Another safety thing, I was telling the kid this other night, I was giving him a lesson. First time I worked with him, I said, show me your setup with nobody on base. And he put his hand way back here. And I'm sure some of you guys see this. When you get your hand in this position here, this little bone right here gets exposed a little bit more, so if that ball hits there, it's going to hurt a lot worse than if it were relaxed and right behind your heel. It's a little bit more protected there. So try not to let your catchers put their hand up in here. All right? And going back to the hand, you'll see a lot of guys now, even when nobody on base, they just sit here like this, hands right here. Runner on base, they're just going to spread out. So everything's kind of consistent. Okay? But for me, look at their feet. Right foot slightly back, slightly open. Try to make sure we're not duck-footed, knees going first and third, knees going to second and short. Okay? Any questions on the setups?
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. Like for me, if I'm here, like I was taught, if I put my hand here with the runner on base, right? And the pitch is up and in, I'm not going to take both hands to catch the ball. what's going to end up happening is this, so it's still exposed. It's exposed out here. But if I'm back in here, as I go, it's a little bit more protected. I'm not saying you're not going to get hit with foul balls. It happens all the time. We had a guy break a finger last year. There's nothing you can do about it sometimes. But to be here and then go, I just feel like this is a much better, more athletic position, so to speak, where you feel like you're letting the ball come to you. That's all. Any other questions on that? The other thing too, and this is kind of picky when I work with my guys, after we give our sign and we get to those setups, this goes kind of back to the first thing I said. As a coach, watch catchers from the opposing team. So they're going to tell you more about what's coming towards the plate on the very next pitch than the pitcher is, because they just don't pay attention to what they're doing. If I give a sign and I get to my setup, nobody on base, and I go right foot all the time on a fastball away, all right? And then I go left foot on a fastball to the side of the plate, and typically most young catchers on all speed pitchers are taught to set up in the middle of the plate. So you'll get this, right there where they just hop and stay in the middle. So I just told you 3 different pitches: fastball away, fastball in, off speed. So for our guys, because guys are watching everything at our level, we're trying to make sure they do it the same all the time. So if I'm going fastball away from the righty, instead of going right foot first, when I get my fastball, I'm just going to go left, right. Okay? Now let's say I go change up, I'm going to go left, right. I'm going to stay in the middle of the plate. And if I go fastball away, I'm going to go left, right. So it always looks the same to the guys in the opposing dugout. Okay? Now you can go right, left all the time. But make sure you do it the same, whatever it is you do, so that you're not tipping something off. I promise you, if you watch catchers this year and watch what they're doing, when they get into their setup, after they give their signs, you're going to have more pitches than you can imagine. And it helps if you have base runners on, you know breaking ball's coming, you have some kind of flash sign, open hand, whatever, this guy's going as soon as the pitcher lifts. You'll be amazed, all right? So going from the setups, the next thing is receiving. And we have new bosses in LA, the sabermetrics guys that came over from Tampa, came over from Oakland. I was in LA last week, and we had meetings, and we brought in our major league catcher, and he was presenting to us pitch rate. And so, according to sabermetrics, our major league catcher's not very good. So I asked him, what do you know about sabermetrics? And he said, I can't frame. So that's our goal this year, is to get his receiving better. Now here's the thing for me about framing. I learned from Mike Sosha, who's the manager from the Angels now, probably more about receiving a pitch than anybody I've ever worked with. A lot different than what you see with college kids and high school kids that we get in the draft. It's more about catching the ball as deep as possible, as opposed to going out the ball. Now, that being said, anything in the strike zone, I know it's a strike. I've got to catch it and keep it a strike. Borderline pitches, I'm trying to catch and make it look like a strike. Anything that I know is a ball, catch it and go back to the pitcher. All right? So now, as we talk about receiving, or now framing, you have to be, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this and be politically correct. There's different ways to do this. I find that most young kids that we get, especially out of high school, are not taught the proper way to do it. So here's my opinion on this, and if y'all disagree, I'm open for it. Most high school kids catch the ball way too far out front. And I think it's because they see guys in college do it. If you watch most guys in the professional game, they catch the ball deeper. And the reason why is, when you're catching guys who throw hard, and I mentioned earlier, late movement, you start going out to get pitches, you're going to get eat up. So you learn to catch the ball deeper, all right? So anything in the strike zone, if I'm set up and I know it's a strike, I'm going to try to catch the ball back in here, all right? Elbow below the hand, let the ball do the work for me. Every time I catch a ball, I'm trying to work the ball back toward the center of my body. The best way I can explain it is, if you take one of those orange cones you see on the side of the road from the Department of Transportation, and you lift that cone up, and the part that sits on the ground, the big end, is pointing towards the pitcher, and the small end, the top of it, is pointing towards you. You're working the ball back towards the tip of that cone, all right? So, as I'm catching the ball, I'm letting the ball ball take me this way. Very subtly, even the ball down, I'm working here, and the ball up, I'm getting here. I'm trying to work everything back towards the center of my body. And that all ties into throwing as well. So anything in the strike zone, catching deeper. All right? I was talking to a guy last week about this. He likes to have these guys working to the center, but get with the wrist. I'm not a big fan of that. I want this wrist, once I catch the ball, to stop the ball and redirect it this way, not like this. Catch it, boom, this way. All right? Working everything back to the center. Now, if the ball gets to the corners, info guy last hour talked about it, it's all about angles. So, if I see the ball get to the corner, now I'm going to have to start going out a little bit to catch, as opposed to catching it back in here. So I want to catch across, I want to catch back here, slight angle, catching the ball out front, and working it back toward the center very subtly. Same with this pitch here, catching it, working it back toward the center very subtly. Okay? This is why, for me, catching the ball out front, I'm going to give you my reason why. If I catch the ball out here, too far, the tendency is to get your arm locked out, just like this. If I get in this position here, I can't stop the ball. If the guy's throwing hard, and I catch the ball like this, my hand's going to get just enough for maybe that umpire calls it a ball. So, I'm here, and I go too far, and this locks out. This is what you see. Same with this pitch here. You get like this, and you get locked out, the glove's going to do this, it's going to be a ball. Now, if I can catch this ball using my legs and stay slightly bent, I'm going to stop the ball and work it back this way. If I have to turn over and catch this ball, and I'm slightly bent, I'm going to be able to stop the ball and work it back this way. As soon as I lock out, I'm in a bad position. So, going back to our major league catcher. The one pitch that he really struggles with, according to the sabermetrics people, pitch down and away, bottom of the strike zone to a right-handed hitter. Now, if we go back farther to his setup, he's a guy that causes some injuries. Has to get rolled in here, and he kind of gets back, hip line gets below his knees, and he doesn't have the range on that pitch. So what we're going to have to do is get him off his heels, get him a little bit more out front, so that now he can catch his ball and work it back this way, as opposed to having to reach, getting locked out, and not being able to stop the ball. So, I hope that makes sense to you. Best way I can explain it, when you catch the ball, have slight bend in your arm. Okay? That'll stop the ball where you catch it. So if you have a guy who doesn't understand, work the ball back to the center, just tell him wherever he catches the ball, stop the ball. And in order to do that, you have to have slight flexion in your arm. Okay? Any questions on that? The other thing with younger catchers that we get, see a lot of catchers when they catch the ball. When they catch the ball out front, they're dropping their eyes, they're dropping their head. So to me, if their head's moving, their eyes are moving. What we want to do is keep our eyes up and work behind the ball, or behind the glove this way, work behind the glove this way, work behind the glove this way, and trying to keep our head as still as possible. So we can use our legs to get there, but keep this still as opposed to dropping. Okay? Any questions on the receiving? We could talk all day about receiving or pitch framing, but kind of keep it here. It's a strike, keep it a strike. Borderline pitch, try to get a strike off the plate. It's a ball. Throw it back. Okay? Before I move on to the blocking stuff, the one thing about receiving, I was working with, some of you guys know him, Garrett Woolware, Audie Clinton. We work out at the same place, and we work out a few times a week, and he's working on the pitch with his glove side. He feels like that's his weakness. Whether to catch the ball here, and work it back, or to turn it over. This again goes back to everybody's different, based on his setup, based on his range. He's a short arm guy like me, so his range is going to be different than a guy with longer limbs. So he said in rookie ball last year, where the umpires are not very good, like the players, they're all learning. Anytime he turned his glove over, it's called a ball. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think as umpires advance, they understand you can still catch a pitch like this and get a called strike. But to do that, we have to keep our glove in this position, not let our hand flex back as we catch it. Does that make sense? So this is okay if the guy wants to do this. He's got to be able to stop the ball where he catches it. All right? Our guy's really good at this pitch right here, according to the numbers. He gets this pitch called a strike to life and catches a lot of pitches like this. All right? So it's okay if the guy turns his glove over. Blocking. And I'm speaking kind of in the order of priorities that we teach. Set up, receiving, blocking, throwing. Throwing being the least important. blocking. To me, blocking is just a mindset of, I'm going to get it done. There's different ways of doing this. All down the middle. Some guys like to kick their feet, some guys like to go straight down. The thing that I found with guys who kick their feet that you have to be really careful of is if you guys, and some of you guys might have catchers like this, when they kick their feet, by the time they hit the ground, you see them falling over. What I find, if you get your knees behind your shoulders too far as you kick, that means you're kicking their feet straight back and they're losing balance. Now they're going to block the ball. The problem is getting up and retrieving the ball is going to be a little bit more difficult. Okay? So when we teach kick the feet, it's not kick straight back like somebody's pulling your feet and pulling you this way. We want to think kick our feet to the side. So that now as we get down, we're a little bit wider, and our knees are under our shoulders, all right, and we have balance. Most guys who kick straight back get real narrow and start getting top heavy. They'll block it, but they're just not in a good position to get up and recover the ball. Okay, so we're talking about kicking the feet, and this is primarily on the ball right in front of you, which, believe it or not, for most guys, it's the hardest pitch to block the ball right in front of them. Balls, it's like that in-between hop. You're not sure what to do. Do I let it just hit me? Do I just drop down? Do I kick my feet? Okay? The other way to block that ball in front of you is just to go down to both knees. Some guys are good at this. Some guys will just drop down, they get their hips too tall, and they're pushing forward so they can't deaden the ball. Okay? A lot of people talk about cutting down the distance. And it's hard to do for me on a ball right in front of you to cut that distance down. Because it's either a fastball right in front of you, which on speaking of that, coaches, please don't expect your catchers to block fastballs in the dirt. It's just too tough. You're just hoping that ball hits you. All right? Because your mindset's not to block a fastball when it comes out of the guy's hands. You're not expecting him to spike it 58 feet. You're just hoping it hits you once it hits the dirt. Balls right and left on fastballs, a little short hop. I actually instruct my guys to try and pick them. Because you've got a better chance of picking that ball as opposed to getting in front of it. Now, we're talking about guys with velocity, too. If the guy's throwing 82, 83, you might have time to get in front of that ball. But if you've got a guy throwing 92, 93, and he spikes one right here, your best chance with a runner on base is to try and pick it. If you get a short hop, if you have a long hop, you might have time. So that's a frustrating thing for guys when I hear guys who've never caught, like, he's got to block that ball. And I'm like, dude, relax. That is really tough. When you're calling a fastball and you're expecting him to hit the mitt, and he spikes it. Breaking balls, change-ups is a whole different mindset for us. We're expecting the ball in the dirt, so we're ready for it.
At our level, I know it's a lot different. You know, like for me, I have one catcher he can pick. My younger catchers, I mean, do you want to fool right now with teaching them to pick, or do you want to go ahead and say, we're going to block that ball every time?
Well, when we practice it, we're practicing blocking.
Okay.
But we also practice that short hop. All right, you got a runner at first base. I'm going to throw you some short hops with something on it. I want you to practice that pick. Then I'm giving them the long hop where they can see the hop and then block it. If you get a long hop where a guy really spikes it bad, you should be able to block it. But if he spikes it right in front of the plate and it's outside of your body, you're much better off trying to pick it. So we work on both. I don't have any problem with teaching guys how to pick that ball. The problem is, if he doesn't pick it, you're yelling at him, hey, you got to block that ball. And I've heard our guys at the front office level, the hub guys, are you not teaching guys to block the ball? Yeah, we're teaching guys to block the ball. But understand when, you know, Kenley Jansen, our closer, is throwing 98, throws that cutter and spikes it right there, you're supposed to block that ball, you're better off trying to pick it. I mean, that's just my opinion.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Some people teach in blocking, straight on, that's what you're doing, you're blocking, you're not trying to catch the ball. Is that a legitimate?
Yeah, yeah, I
You
mean,
teach them to try to glove everything?
no, I've only met one guy who played with us, he played 10 years in the big leagues. When he would go down and block the ball, he would try to catch everything. But he would put his glove right here. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But he could do it. But anytime we went down to block, we're trying to let the ball go. Speaking of all the converted guys we're doing, that's the last thing they get good at. Because they're so good with their hands, they don't want to block the ball. They'll go down and block it and end up doing this. And it looks silly, but, you know, until they learn to let the ball hit them. Because it goes against everything your brain's telling you to do, let the ball hit you. Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I'm working on all of it. So kick it back on the ball in front of you, you're going straight down. Either way's fine, just make sure that their hips, as they're starting to block, they're able to start sinking these things back. Okay? Side to side. If I'm going to my right, and you should ask your catchers this, if I'm blocking the ball to my right, which knee's going to hit the ground first? Trail knee is always going to hit the ground first. If my lead knee hits first, it's like a brake on a car. I'm just going to stop, you're going to see that guy fall over. So if I'm going to my right, and I call it a slider, right-handed slider, I'm going to anticipate, all right, I'm going here, so I'm going to feel a little bit more pressure on the inside of my left foot so I can push. Now this is going to hit the ground first, and then I'm going to get here. Pretty basic. So now I got a left-handed slider. Hold the left-handed slider. Now as I get here, I got a little bit more pressure on the inside of my right foot. I'm going to take that angle there. Okay? Here's where I differ a little bit. Maybe some guys who teach blocking. I'm not big on funneling the ball back to the plate. And my reason is, if I get around the ball too much, trying to funnel it back to the plate, right-handed break ball, and I don't square it up just right, it's going to go that way. And sometimes, this sounds crazy, but a lot of times I thought, well, they keep saying the right-handed breaking ball is going to bounce and go that way. If a guy's got a really good one, it probably does. For me, I was wondering how many times our catchers were getting around too much and making the ball look like it was spinning that way, because we're not centering it up. So for me, we're taking the angle up the first baseline, we're going to try to stay square to the pitcher. All right, so that when we block it, the ball stays right in front of us. Now if we have to make a play, our direction is going towards second, it's much easier than getting around and funneling it back to the plate and having to come here and pick it up and throw it second. Does that make sense?
So a better terminology would be block it back to the pitcher?
Yeah, I mean, really all I'm saying is take your angle but stay square to the pitcher, not back towards the plate. Okay. Going back to our major league catcher, he called me, what's today? It's Saturday. He called me Thursday. Some of the stuff he's doing now, he's having to retrain his body because he just had 2 surgeries this year. He's working with the catching guy from the Brewers. And he said, listen, I'm working on some blocking stuff. What do you think about this? So he goes through the scenario. He knows what I teach and what our major league catching instructor teaches. Trail knee always hits first. Now you'll watch a guy like Yachty, lead knee hits first. He blocks on one knee. You have to remember, he knows where that ball's going to bounce 9 out of 10 times when it comes out of the pitcher's hand. Because that's where they're trying to bounce that ball there. He knows. It's a little bit different for most guys who aren't that good. So AJ goes, he's talking to me about my blocking. If he thinks that having the trail knee hitting first is actually not going to work for me anymore. He's talking about leading with the hip. So I never heard the terminology lead with the hip if I'm going to my right or lead with the hip if I'm going to my left. But if that works, so be it. I said, how does it feel? I said, it feels great. I want to do it. So there's more than one way to do this. I just find that if you teach a guy to let the trail knee hit first, he's going to have more range, he's going to stay more balanced, ball's right in front, he's able to get up and get the play better. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you some blocking drills real quick. And this is stuff I do with my kid every day, here for the last month. We do this with our catchers every morning at spring training at 7 o'clock. First thing that we do our receiving, barehand receiving. This is just a little blocking series that we do every morning, and then once the season starts, we do it right before the game. These are real simple. You're probably going to think, God, these are big really guys doing this. Easy. The first drill we're going to do, we're going to get on both knees. All right? And we talked about this throwing hand being in here when we're in our action setup. So I'm just going to lay this hand right against my belly button and give a nice little target. My hips are up, a little bit of flex, and I'm just going to be maybe a little farther back than where Coach Hill is. He's going to be right in front of me on the knee, and he's just going to bounce the ball real easy. I'm just going to work on doing this. Boom. Sinking my hips, getting the shoulders over the glove. He's just going to bounce it nice and easy. So all I'm doing is reinforcing, keeping the glove down, keeping the chin tucked, tracking the ball in, learning how to deaden the ball by sinking my hips. Okay? If you have a guy start like this, he's not getting anything out of it. Okay? So hips up, boom. 10 balls right out. Piece of cake. Okay? After that, we go into what we call a series of roll blocks. And some of you guys might have seen these. You're probably 8 to 10 feet away. Get the guy in his action set up. So the coach is going to be 8 to 10 feet away with a ball. He's going to roll the ball with some hair on it. All right? It's going to be pretty firm. So I'm just going to be in my setup. He's going to roll right in front of me. I'm going to work on my block. Get 5 right down the middle. Then we're going to get 5 to our right with a roll. We're just working on the angle, getting the glove down. And this is a great drill for a guy who has a tendency to bring the glove up. Okay? We're going to go 5 to our left. All right? 8 to 10 feet away, little bounce. I'm in my action setup, boom, get down and block it. Same thing with my right, 5 to my right, 5 to my left. So 2 knee blocks, roll blocks, and then a little bounce. So everything's controlled. And this for me is good for high school coaches, college coaches, it's good for us. Because a lot of times you guys don't have time to spend with catchers. They're down in the bullpen, or maybe they're feeding the fungo hitters. If you can teach a catcher this type of routine, they can go do it with each other, and they get some work in. So the bare hand receiving right to our blocking series. Another blocking drill, I love it, is fungo. We're standing in front of the mound. You got to be able to handle it pretty good. You get the guy behind the plate, you just go to one hoppers right at it. Because they don't know if it's going to be right in front, slightly to the left, slightly to the right, so they're reading the ball a little bit more. Okay? Any questions on the blocking? Kind of go through this pretty quick.
You always block baseball.
The only time we didn't, I had a coach from the White Sox tell me this drill the other day. Also, does anybody know what the hack attack machine is? Anybody seen it? 3-row machine, you can break the balls, you can do sliders, cutters, fastballs. You can probably do this with a regular machine. I don't know. Take your regular baseballs and set it for like a break. We don't block fastballs when we're practicing our blocking. So we'll set up a right-handed breaking ball, like I said. Put a right-handed or a regular baseball in, and it comes out as a strike. Set up where it's a low strike. Then you put one of those Incrediballs in, the soft ones, and as soon as it goes in, for some reason, because of the density, I guess, it doesn't come out quite the same, and it bounces right from the plate every time. So the catcher doesn't know if it's a ball or strike, or a ball in the dirt, or a ball that he can catch. So you go hard ball, and then you mix in that soft one, and have to block. Now they're not going to be able to keep that ball going all the time, but they're training their eyes and reading the ball, and it just seems to work. Crazy drill, but guy showed it to me, tried it, or got selected. Some other blocking drills, I'm trying to think. We don't ever practice fastballs off the machine. And as crazy as I get throwing fungo balls at them, and that's more just having time and kind of building some team on the modern area. Any other questions on the blocking? No? All right. I'm getting ready to talk about the throwing, and for me, this is kind of I'm not going to say a pet peeve, but I guess it is in a way. I think throwing has been given too much emphasis on the position of the catcher. Whether it's from a college coach, whether it's from a scout, whether it's from a high school coach, whether I get caught up in it, or man, this guy can really throw. Going back to the guy we drafted out of OU, who's a Johnny Bench Award winner, I mean, he could really, really throw. I mean, flat out wing it on the bag every time. But he picked at other stuff that would make him successful at the big level. For me, the throwing is the most overrated thing a catcher's going to do. Now in high school, I know it's different because guys run. College and pro level, pitchers start learning how to hold runners. They can get the ball to the plate quicker because they throw harder. Guys just don't run. All right? I can go into a town for 5 days and watch one of our catchers, and I might see 1 or 2 solo base attempts in 5 games. So for me, if I'm trying to develop a catcher, the last thing I want to look at, even though I'm not guilty of it myself, is how we throw. Because there's so many more things that go into being a good catcher than throwing. But we all get caught up in it. If you can really throw, you want to show it all the time. But if you can't catch and block, you're not as apt to get back there and do it. So for me, the battle probably at y'all's level more so than in mine. If you've got a kid who doesn't throw real well, but if you can get him behind the plate and catch and block, you're much better off than having a guy who can't do those 2 things but can really throw. That's just my opinion. It makes a huge difference. Now, with the throwing part, and I hear this a lot, and I know I'm going to make somebody mad here, but does anybody know what the major league average time from home to second is on the throw? 2.0. Right? 2.0 seconds on the time it hits my glove and the time it hits the middle of the glove. 2 seconds. And as sure as I'm sitting here, my oldest son tomorrow is going to this thing at AC Florida, this pro day they're doing, and he's a catcher. As sure as I'm standing here, there's somebody tomorrow that's going to be given a time of a 1.85 and 1.92. And to me, There's a showcase throw, and then there's a game throw. And most of these kids don't understand the difference. So they're going to all these showcases, and they're getting these times, and when they get in a game, they can't repeat them. And we're doing them a disservice saying, all right, let's get you on the watch. The watch does not matter, not to me. Now, my dilemma is, do I teach my kid how to cheat and do what they're doing, where his times are going to be better, but I know that doesn't work. If you've got a kid who's a 2.0 to a 2.2 in high school, put the ball in the bag, be tickled pink. Because I don't have anybody, I've got a guy who can throw a 1.87 at best. And he's a guy that's Vanderbilt University, one of the top catchers in the country, and to me, I consider him the best thrower we've got. In game, he's a 1.87 on his best day. So this is my little soapbox where you need to stress receiving, you need to stress blocking more than you do the throwing. Not to say that's not important, but if you've got a guy, he's only throwing 2.2s. Well, as a coach, guess what our job is? Let's teach the pitcher how to get the ball to play quicker. So now that 2.2 throws out that guy who's still first to second. Does anybody know typically what it takes a guy from first to get the second on the steal? All right. So what is the optimal time from a pitcher to be from home to the plate? 1.3 if we're a 2.0. Now our job is to teach them how to do that. I've never seen a team steal their way to a World Series championship. Kansas City tried it, and they were pretty successful. Them guys could flat out run. Every instruction league, when we play those guys like Dyson, when he was coming up, some of those other guys would be like, boys, y'all better get ready, they're going to run. So there are teams that try to build their winning on speed. But over the course of the season, to me, if you've got a guy who can consistently put the ball in the bag in high school between 2.0, 2.2, 2.25, then you're lucky. Because most of my guys are anywhere from 1.9 to 2.1. And I'm sitting here going, man, are we getting the wrong guys? Because I hear about all these guys throwing 1.75s, and I don't see it. So for me, just understand, if a guy's throwing 2.2, if he's consistent, I take him every day of the week, especially in high school. All right? Now, the throwing part. To me, we don't spend a lot of time, and that might sound backwards to y'all, we don't spend a lot of time talking about footwork. We talk, most of our time spent on throwing is all about getting the ball from the glove to our hand. We talk about the transfer more than anything. So every drill that we do is set up for transfer. None of it is set up for footwork. Because I feel like if you can get the ball in your hand properly and in the right part of your body, your feet are going to follow. Okay? We talked earlier about letting the ball come to you. That's our goal. We don't ever want to go out and get the ball. This goes back to that showcase time and that game time. If I go out and get the ball in the game, I'm either going to get peppered with a bat, or my first move is towards second base and that ball sinks late or cuts late, I'm in a bad position. I can't get off against the road. Okay? So for me, when we're talking about throwing, obviously we got to be in a good action setup. All right? So I'm here, I'm tracking the ball, I'm trying to catch the ball deeper, not out front. Because the farther I catch this ball out front, the farther I've got to get it to get to my hand. So for me, this goes back to anything in the strike zone I can catch deeper and get the ball in my hand. Now, if it gets to the corners, I might have to go out a little bit out here. But everything that we work on is where do we put this ball in our hand? Everything he said in the last hour about infield play, where did you notice he took the ball out of his glove in relation to the body? Right in the center of his body. Every time. I don't care if it was a backhand. I don't care if it was a forehand. He talked about not flipping the glove. He talked about not carrying it back here. It's the same exact thing for a catcher. So if you're a great infield coach, you should be able to teach catching no problem when it comes to the throwing part. Because everything we do is getting the ball out of the glove in the center of the body. Now, if I get a ball down and away, how am I going to get that ball to the center of my body? I've got to wait, catch it deeper, boom, take it out in the center of the body. Okay? Everything we set up is for taking the ball out of the glove in the center of the body, just like an infield would. I'm trying to think of the best way to approach this. All right. Separation. This is something that's big for me that I learned maybe 10 years ago. Most guys, and I don't know how many catching guys are in here, yell at me and show what you think, but I know what we teach is once that ball gets in our hand, this glove is never going to come past the center of our body. Now, the older school thought was, once we catch this ball, this glove and the ball is going to come to the back shoulder, right? That's how I was taught. You watch guys who can really throw, and I'm sure there's ways to pull it up on YouTube. When that ball gets here and they get it in their hand, that glove will not go any further. They start to separate this way. And the best way I can relate it is a pitcher on the mound. When he comes set, he breaks his hand. Where does he break? In the center. You see it gets shortstop, go to ground ball. He doesn't take the ball back here. He doesn't take it up here. It comes out and they start to separate. Okay? That kind of goes against conventional teaching of get the glove back here. I've seen one guy who was a Gold Glove winner, so I'm not saying it can't be done. I just think physically it's harder for most guys to get it. Brad Alston's, who manages Detroit, he played with us for a couple of years. And he would take that glove all the way back. And I asked him, well, why do you do that? I don't get why you do that. He goes, I don't do that. What do you do? I said, no, I don't. So we went and looked at it. He's like, I didn't know. But most guys who throw really well, when they catch that ball and it gets in this hand, as they start to turn, that glove is not going to go past the center part of their chest. And they start to separate. Am I making sense? So, our catcher, AJ, I think discount last year, the excuse is he was hurt. He didn't throw well last year. But the previous 2 years, I think he was number 1 over a guy like Young. And then the year before that, he was number 2 in the league in goal percentage. There again, I say it's overrated, but we got a guy that's really good and build it up. I think he threw out like 42 to 43%. The reason he throws guys out, he doesn't have a great arm. But if you watch this guy throw, I don't care where the pitch is, the ball's coming out the same spot every time. So, obviously the one down the middle is easy. So I get this ball here, and I'm starting to turn. This is one thing you need to watch. When this guy turns the glove, most guys who throw well turn the glove this way. Some guys will turn it more here. What you don't want is the guy coming underneath the glove to take it out, which a lot of young kids do because they're trying to create arm strength or throw the ball hard, and they're trying to get some arm swing. It's just a bad habit at a young age to begin like this. A longer arm action. But if you can get a guy to catch the ball and get this here, and once he starts to go back, this starts to happen. All right? Especially being from South Carolina. If you want to teach a kid how to throw, you talk to them about both of them. It's very simple. As opposed to pulling the release here, we're basically trying to pull it back here. All right? With the hand slightly above the elbow. So I get the ball in my hand here, and I'm going back and start to separate it. All right? So instead of doing this, when my body's ready, and now I've got to go back out to get separation, I've eliminated that move right there. All right, so obviously the pitch down the middle is easy. This ball here, you watch the info guy talk about that forehand, you don't want to do this. As we catch this ball here, we still want to be direct this way, get it out, boom. And on the ball here, maybe right-hand slider, fastball, catching it, bringing it back to the center, boom. All to the right can be really easy, but it can also be really hard. Slow breaking ball to the right, you're already turned. Come up and throw. Fastball to the right, cutter to the right, slider to the right, it's hard. The hardest thing to teach a kid to do is catch that ball and come this way with it, as opposed to catching it and coming this way with it off that back foot. Very difficult to have a guy learn how to do that. But everything we do, everything happens in the center of the body. We get that separation as quick as we can. Okay? So we talk about quick hands, not quick feet. All right? So I feel like if we do this right, our feet are going to be in the right position. Now, real quickly on the footwork, 2 ways to teach it: gain ground, replace your feet. Most younger kids think gain ground because it makes them throw the ball harder. All right? And obviously I think all y'all know what I mean by gain ground. When I catch the ball, I'm coming here with my first step. Then I get in position to throw. I actually think that's harder to do as a catcher. I think replacing your feet is much more athletic. So as I catch the ball, getting here, so that my hips stay underneath me. So I'm just taking my right foot towards my left heel. I don't want it to get all the way there. I want to get it down, and I'm driving into my left leg. Okay? Either way is fine. There might be a modification where a guy gains a little bit of ground coming this way, but he's also replacing his feet. Okay? Also, guys who throw really well. Has anybody ever heard of the tee drill that you do with catchers? You draw the tee in the dirt. Basically, we've got one right here. So home plate's up in here somewhere. We draw that line down the middle, we set the line up here, we get her set up, have the ball thrown to you. This foot should either come here and stay on that line, or go slightly forward. Pretty simple. You can watch guys who throw really well. This is the big difference for me. when they get here and they land, their left foot's always going to be to the left of that center line. They're not going to be in it. So when they land on it, they're blocking themselves off and they work around it. All right? Now, landing slightly open here, or to the left of that line, but this right here is always closed. We call it 2 hips, 1 shoulder. So from center field, you're going to see a guy that throws well. As he goes to throw, you're going to see both hips, but you're only going to see 1 shoulder. Okay? So I'm going to land just to the left of that center line, but I'm going to stay closed up top. So they're kind of working independent of each other, if that makes sense. Okay? So get the ball in my hand, separate, boom, close up top, slightly open on the landing leg. That doesn't mean flip one straight ahead. Okay? Any questions on that? Pretty simple. All right, I'll wrap this up. I'll give you some drills on throwing. First drill we do, we roll a baseball to the catcher. No glove. So just get him in his setup. I'm going to roll 3 balls to his forehand. He's going to field like this. He's going to work on getting his hand wrong. 3 balls, I'm just going to roll him, backhand, make sure he's not here and here. He's getting it back to the center, throwing. After you do the rolls, then you add a bounce. Same thing, but it just makes him concentrate a little bit more. A little bounce with the forehand, catching here, boom, getting it up. Maybe a slow breaking ball type pitch right here. Rebounce, and he's catching it here, working it back, boom. Okay? After that, a drill that I really like to teach this separation a little bit quicker. Put a ball in the catcher's hand. Stand back there. You're throwing to him now. He's throwing the ball, 4 seconds, 70, 80 feet. He's in his setup. He's got this ball in his hand. You're going to throw him a pitch. He's going to catch it here. He's going to throw this ball right here. And you'll find that naturally they just get into that good strong position quicker because they're not worried about running this. We have 2 catchers who struggle with that. So every day, anytime they play catch, they always have to have a ball in their hand. Catch this one, throw this one. Just to eliminate that habit of taking the glove to you. Okay? Trying to think of any other drills. Real basic stuff, like the one you guys said earlier. It's not rocket science. You're just trying to get you guys to be as efficient as possible. Okay? So rolls, bounce, 2-ball drill.
Travis, on that 2 balls, whatever, they almost kind of come together.
If they're doing it right, they should catch the ball and this glove stays right there as they get up to throw. Does that make sense? So that this is firm and they're working towards it instead of coming here and go back. Okay. Then another thing that we do, and it's not really a drill that you have to do with them, but when they're out doing their throwing program, 10 minutes before practice, whatever, and those last couple minutes, just have them start with the ball in the glove, set it where they'll get force in grip, and just work on it. Standing up, and then squat it down. Boom. Okay? Real simple stuff. Watch catchers, watch the transfer. If you can get that transfer right, your guys should go to throw pretty good. Any questions?
Block ball, and guy takes away the start. How do you teach the catcher to get out of the block stance and make him throw in the balls out front?
And they're actually making a throw in that specific play. Well, for me, once we block it, the last thing we want to do is check where the runner's going. We got to get on the ball as quick as we can. I teach them to retrieve the ball if it's a bunt, so that if the ball's on the ground and it's still, when I get here, most of the time if the ball's still on a bunt, you're going to barehand it. But on this particular play, I'd rather the guy go down with both hands because the tendency is they get rushed and they peek and they just don't hold the ball. So I basically treat it like a bowling bunt, but once I'm there, I'm throwing just to the left of center, not right of center. So here, using both hands, and then I just replace my feet. I always want them replacing their feet to game over. The last thing I want is a bad throw. The guy beats it, he's safe and safe. And that's the last thing on the throwing part that I try to get my guys to understand, and I'll be done. Throw out the guys you're supposed to throw out. At our level, 3-1 counts, 3-2 counts are automatic runs. Everybody's running 3-1, 3-2 for the most part, unless you've got number 3 or 4 hitter up. Okay? 3-1, 3-2 counts are automatic run counts. That being said, not everybody running 3-1 counts are base stealers. They're just going to stay out of double plays. Okay? So you might have a catcher at first base, it's 3-1 count. Now my catcher should already know that I got the low average runner at first, 3-run count, he's going. If I get the ball in my hand, he's going to be out every time. So to me, there are times where you're not going to be as quick as you need to be, as opposed to when you got Billy Hamilton on first base and you know he's going first or second pitch. There's a different feel to it. If you can teach your guys, I don't know as much about high school. You have automatic counts where you like to run. But if it's 3-1-3-2, and you see that against the team you play against, hey, they're running 3-1-3-2 every time, teach your catchers. They're not getting as good at jumps in those counts. They're not trying to steal a base. They're just trying to get in motion to stay out of double play. So that being said, if he's not getting a great jump, get the ball in the hand, he's out. Or on a hit and run. Usually you don't hit and run with a burner at first base. You hit and run with a guy who's not very slow or not very fast. Got a guy who puts the ball in play a lot. So you see him going, ball's not put in play, those are the guys you got to throw out. So there are situations where I try to get our mindset up. I throw these guys out, I'm doing my job. Base stealers, they steal bases. It's like home run hitters, that's what they do, that's what they get paid to do. So if you can get a guy to control it, you're good. You just don't want somebody who the team's run on it will. If they can control it to a certain degree, you should be fine. So, any other questions?
Could be a guy in the organization who's got a plus arm but hasn't allowed a run.
Sure.
Will you?
For me, it's usually one of two things, and it goes back to the transfer. This is the first thing I'll look at. If a guy gets like this and he's transferred deep, then his arm's going to be late. So if he can get the ball in his hand quicker, then he's in control of what he's doing. If he's getting the ball in his hand late, he's ready to go, his body's starting to link in front of his arm is late, and that ball's going to run. Does that make sense? It's like somebody might say, hey, get your arm out, and that's really not true. You'll see a lot of guys that throw, when they get here, their elbows actually below the shoulder. So most people say his arms are really low. As they go to throw, that's when he comes up. So I don't necessarily look at the arm slot or arm angle when the guy's running the ball. I look at how quick he's getting the ball in his glove or he's throwing it. Other things, maybe he's closing off a little bit, look at the feet, see if he's working around it, getting running that way or effective. But I would look at the transfer first. So, anything else?